Hello and welcome to There's No Business Like, a podcast where friends and industry colleagues explore topics and interview leaders in our industry of professional theatrical touring.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to There's No Business Like. This is one of your favorite hosts, Katie Miller with the Michigan Maven Creative Associates, and I am here today with three amazing guests from the state of Arizona. Christina Park, the Executive Director of Arizona Commission on the Arts, Bonnie Schock, Executive Director of Fox Tucson Theater, and Michelle McLennan, Cultural Arts Manager and of the Cultural Development Department at the City of Chandler, Arizona, and President of the Arizona Presenters Alliance. Welcome, ladies.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
It's so wonderful to have you here today, and thank you for spending time with us here on the podcast. So first, just for a little bit of context, I would love for each of you to give us a short, brief overview of you and your organization and how you sort of plug in to the Arizona art scene. So Michelle, why don't we start with you?
All right. Well, my daytime job is Chandler Center for the Arts, where I'm the general manager, and I'm also the president of the Chandler Cultural Foundation, which is the 501c3 that manages the Art Center on behalf of the City of Chandler. We're celebrating our 36th season. We are a joint funded, one-of-a-kind structure, in fact, the only structure of its kind in the United States, jointly owned by a school district, a city, with nonprofit management by a 501c3. So I wear a lot of hats. We have what's called a time of use agreement, where arts education is the focus of our building Monday through Thursday. And Friday through Sundays, we become a public touring venue and community space. So we have a combined annual budget of about $6 million. And we are really a model for collaborative programming for smaller communities. With 36 years under our belt, it was kind of a weird thing to do 36 years ago. And now people come to us like, how do we build this public-private partnership? So that's what I do in my day. And then by night, I'm the president of the Arizona Presenters Alliance, which is a volunteer membership statewide consortia of arts presenters and professionals. And we represent over 40 arts organizations across Arizona.
Excellent. Welcome, Michelle. Bonnie, give us a little bit about yourself and the Fox Tucson Theater.
Hello. Thanks for having me. I'm Bonnie Schock, and I've been involved in the performing arts industry throughout my entire career, going on 35 years now. I am currently the executive director of the Fox Tucson Theater. The Fox is a historic venue, originally a movie theater, in the heart of downtown Tucson. And we have a mission to enliven Tucson, fostering community growth and connections by shaping exceptional live arts experiences in a celebrated setting. And that location, that place-based thing is incredibly important, both to the Fox and also to the city of Tucson. It's a key part of what we do and who we are in making memories and connections, and ultimately making Tucson really proud of the kind of arts that we can put forward and participate in together as a community. We are primarily do presenting. We also have a robust education program. We're currently serving about 100,000 people a year in a wide range of different genres and activities, and with this really, really growing and emerging youth and also adult education program that's really becoming more and more central to the identity of the organization.
Excellent. Welcome, Bonnie. I'm excited to talk about programming more with you and Michelle here in a few minutes. So, all right, Christina, I would love to hear more about you and the Arizona Commission on the Arts.
So I represent the Arizona Commission on the Arts. We're the state agency for arts and culture for Arizona. Our mission is that we imagine an Arizona where everyone can participate in and experience the arts. And how lovely is that? To that end, we provide grants and programming for individuals, organizations outside of the arts, government entities, to create vibrant communities for Arizonans to live in. And what that tends to look like is that we distribute about 600 grants a year. And so we have a small and mighty team that does that. And then also about providing professional development support and all the things that we hear from artists and art organizations about needs for Arizona.
Excellent. Well, welcome, Christina. It's so great to have you here. So, friends, I wanted to gather you all together because I visited Arizona probably 15 years ago now on a solo trip to the Southwest after my first season as a professional theater manager. And I said, I got to get out of here for a while. And I took this wonderful 10-day trip down to the Southwest and have been in love with Arizona, New Mexico ever since. And so knowing Michelle through our work as consortium presidents, I wanted to bring you all together to have a conversation about, I think, a state that doesn't get very much attention on the national stage. And I wanted to learn more about it personally myself and give you all a chance to tell us a little bit more. So first, I want to start with the question, how would you describe the vibe of Arizona generally, and what's the vibe of your performing arts scene? And do specific cities or regions have their own personalities when it comes to the arts?
I'll start. I mean, I'm kind of a newcomer to Arizona. And so I've been in Arizona for just over 5 years. And I would say that at least in Tucson, there's a very laid back vibe. And at the same time, there is a sense of, there's such a sense of pride of place, whether it's about the desert or whether it's about a sense of fortitude, all the things you might kind of think of about the American West is very much encapsulated in the way people, both the artists and the arts administrators and cultural leaders, as well as the audiences kind of seem to come to the work from both a sense of casualness, but also a sense of real identity and this kind of examination of identity. So about the landscape and the terrain and all of those things put together. So that those are my impressions over the last 5 years of this kind of unique vibe of this place.
As someone who's been here for over 50 years, that's hard to imagine. It's interesting. When I thought of the question, it's like rooted in place is definitely true. And I think that wide open terrain has something to do with that. It's just the Wild West, man. You can do anything and you're rooted in place. And I would say that from that regional perspective, so Southern Arizona, where Bonnie is, from that regional perspective where I'm at in the East Valley of Phoenix Metro, which is a ginormous city, I view Chandler as this kind of welcoming and dynamic, inclusive, high-tech, diverse space. There's lots of family and education focus. And so there's this deep love of how arts integrate with highly educated, very persistent family values, and rooted in place is everything. I mean, Chandler is a very different vibe than Tucson, but we all share this desert that is a very open terrain.
Christina, what are your feelings about the vibe?
Absolutely. I think it's incredibly vibrant. I'm located here in Phoenix, and something that to really emphasize, to build off of what Michelle said, is that Phoenix is the sixth largest city in the US. And the General Valley that we exist in is actually multiple cities that grew so large that we almost sort of became one landscape. I would say that area is incredibly vibrant. And then something I do want to quote sort of a former chairwoman of the NEA, Jane Chu, that when you visit one community and you know one community, all you know is one community, right? Mm-hmm. And so I think that holds very strongly with Arizona, because just this last year, we did a whole sort of tour of 20 different communities in Arizona, and every single one is vibrant, but also very distinctive. Arizona is an incredible state in the ways that are hard for, as you mentioned, Kate, for the rest of the nation to understand. 26% of the land of our state is actually sovereign tribal nations. And then if you think about, it takes us, 8 to 9 hours to go from just one corner to the other if you're driving at the legal 75 miles per hour. Right? Yeah. And we have 6 different ecological areas within our one state. And so it is something that even if you visit one town, one city, you really do have to visit another in order to really understand it.
So jumping off of that vibe that you're talking about, how does that lend to organizations like the three of yours and others in the state coming together to engage in the arts, engage in advocacy, engage in cooperation, collaboration? Michigan is a similarly large state, right? North to south of just the Lower Peninsula is more than an 8-hour drive. And then you add the Upper Peninsula, right? And you've got several more hours. So I understand being a big state and the challenges that come along with trying to get everybody on the same page, whether it's at a state level or just in a regional level. So with that sort of attitude vibe, what are the connections like between organizations, and what are the maybe advantages or disadvantages of sort of this you've met one community, you know one community sort of experience of Arizona?
Well, I'm going to just say it briefly. I look at it like we go. I'm just going to cut to the chase. The funding is terrible. I mean, it's terrible. We're 48th in the nation, so that's kind of crappy. But we are scrappy. Like we turn that into the most incredible, loving relationships between communities. I've mentored just about every person across this. Like that's an exaggeration, but lots of people, rural, small orgs that are just trying to make something happen. And there's a spirit of collegiality that is talked about in the present touring industry. They're like, what's going on in Arizona? Y'all work together. That's really interesting. Y'all kind of work together. And I wouldn't say that that's the case for the state as a whole. I don't know. I can't speak to that. But from the presenting side, there's a lot of like kind of, well, what are you doing? How are we doing that? How do we work together and collab? And I feel like I know, and part of that's APA, but knowing every person who runs an art center, I know from Litchfield Park to Silver Creek to Yuma to like, there's no one we haven't met because we're all trying to help each other be scrappy in this environment. So that's kind of my little piece of the puzzle there.
Christina, you're working at a state level. So what are you seeing in sort of statewide conversations or statewide opportunities for collaboration and work together?
I would say we are a big and also a small state. So very much to Michelle's point is that most people know each other across the communities. We are a state deeply connected through the highway system, we travel all around. What I'm hearing from communities is a want to know each other more regionally, especially out in the rural areas. The cities of Tucson and Phoenix, they have sort of these multi layers of funding in addition to the state. But rural areas, it's even more sparse. And so, what I do see is that arts and cultural organizations that I see very distinctively lean into more than just arts and culture. These are organizations, these are buildings, historic buildings that are recovered, and so much love and energy. I was just out in Safford, which is sort of the east side of Arizona, and there's an amazing theater that is being renovated right now that they show the amount of time, energy, effort that came not just from individuals, but the community itself. And I see arts and cultural organizations activating in a way to provide social services. These are definitely points in rural area where the organizations are truly lean into community work.
The spirit of collaboration in the performing arts in and of itself is really kind of integral to the whole concept. There isn't anything without some sense of collaboration, and I think that extends into organizational scope and scale, and ultimately into statewide scope and scale. It just takes a lot of people to do this work well. There really is a sense that I've seen in Arizona of recognizing the individual talents and lifting those up. Michelle's an incredible example of that. I've experienced it, witnessing her leadership and other people, like just really being aware that each person who comes to it, whether it's a board member, whether it's a volunteer, whether it's your program manager, whether it's a front of house person, whatever it is, or whether it's the star on stage, that sense of like seeing who's in front of you, what they have to bring to the table, and why they're at it, seems it's just part of what's going on. I think on the same time, we all deal with this tension of a desire for collaboration at an even bigger level, right? And really seeing the outcomes that are possible when we can implement that in a truly deep way, while we're struggling on an individual organization level with the volume of work, the challenges that come there. So I think that tension is alive, and I feel it all the time. I see it in others. The kind of desire to do even more. So I think it's happening, and it also could still be happening more if we could find the ways.
Can I add on just,
Yeah.
it's so true. Like, I feel like the spirit of collaboration of my small piece in this is for survival a little bit. It's about like helping each other and keeping us on the team. It's like theater cast, we're going to
Yeah.
get through this. But then there's these massive opportunities for collaboration, and we're still trying to get by a lot of times. And there's so much that we could be doing and learning from others, but that tension, I feel like that is such a perfect way to say it, Bonnie, is I feel that tension all the time. There's so much to be explored, but that's the Wild West. It's like a wide open canvas that you can literally go make a difference in a big way, where you're in more entrenched communities, or it feels very open here that anyone can kind of step up and lead those kinds of collaborations.
That's interesting. Have you seen anything like that come to fruition? Like, have you seen a project that's come bubbled to the top and people actually have the opportunity to jump on it and come together? Have we seen those successes, or does it feel like the challenges are just too insurmountable?
And I would ask Christina what she's seen, but for my part, like on APA, we've done block booking with artists that we got anchors from across the major venues or larger venues, so we could provide up to like 7 tours in rural communities. So we've done that many times, where we've done collaborative artists to rural communities where we're basically funding it. And we've done that successfully several times. And usually you have to start over every time. It's not a thing that like has any type of model for sustainability, but we have been able to like pull it off.
Yeah, I think at the individual program level, we see it quite a lot, and it's actually a key to some of the recent growth for the Fox of our education program, because my education team is incredibly small. And we think, well, what are the gaps in the community that could be filled, and how can we do that in a way that will actually really have meaningful outcomes? And the key has been partnership. It's to go to another organization and go, okay, here's what we bring to the table, here's what you bring to the table, and we're going to lift it up together.
Christina, I want to see if we can tie this all together, because you used to work, your position before being at the commission was with the Studio for Creativity Place and Equitable Communities at Arizona State University. And so I feel like there's a couple of threads here that tie nicely to the work that you did there, like around creative placemaking and collaboration and taking opportunities as they come. And then also, like, I had a note that from my brief time traveling down there, it felt like art was everywhere. Like, placemaking is maybe ahead of its time in Arizona versus the rest of the country. And I don't know if it has to do with the weather. You could just be outside all the time. So, like, versus Michigan, where we're inside our houses, like, 6 months out of the year, frozen. But it just feels like there's a lot more opportunity for that sort of work where you're at. So I'm curious, like, how you see all these pieces coming together between the natural environment, opportunities for collaboration, and this idea of placemaking.
Absolutely does influence. I reflect on my time working pretty extensively on creative placemaking, placekeeping. I see it everywhere in Arizona, and it does sort of that is what attracted me here at the commission, is the way that, to reference what Michelle said, that we're scrappy as a state. And a byproduct of that is that organizations and and individuals in the arts and culture community are also deeply integrated with the communities. We've heard both from Bonnie and Michelle about how place is such a huge part of the way we understand the arts here. And I'll give a couple just sort of examples, because Arizona is both a place of deep landscapes. You don't see people if you Google Arizona, I would say the first things that come up is a cactus in the middle of nowhere, which is beautiful. It is a reality, but also at the same time, it's a narrative that is not true. Arizona, even in the small rural towns, are deeply filled with people that care strongly about their future, strongly about the vibrancy of what does it mean to live there. And yes, sometimes it can be a struggle, but also these are the moments where projects around arts and culture really come together, and they bring people that have nothing to do with the arts. It's that one person that's in economic development or that one farmer down the way. And these moments of intense collaboration, I see as a huge highlight here in Arizona.
All right, I'm going to switch gears a little bit. I want to talk about programming. So, Bonnie and Michelle, this is for you as presenters. I just want to know, what do audiences look for in Arizona? What are they clamoring for? What are they hungry for? Where do you see the best attendance? And as someone who loves the Michigan art scene, and I love local and regional performers and have tried best as I can in my career to integrate them into larger touring schedules, what is the balance of local and regional performing artists, bands, theater companies, things like that, with national touring acts? What do your audiences want, and what's your balance of programming like?
There isn't any one answer, right? And as soon as you try to say what does an Arizona audience want, or even what does a Tucson audience want, or even what does my country music liking audience want,
Right.
it becomes incredibly hard. There's metrics that are about ticket sales, right? You can go, okay, well this sells. And that's one metric. There's metrics of what does it feel like in the room when people are there. That's a different kind of metric. So there's all kinds of ways you can look at what matters. For the Fox, and wait, let me go back for a second. The other thing is that every venue, especially when you're talking about performing arts organizations, every venue is different. And just like a human being, a venue has its own strengths and weaknesses. And I think the real key to programming is that you program for where you are. You program for what your strengths are. Even if the thing I love the most, like as an individual, my aesthetic is X. If my venue really is able to soar when it does Y and Z, I better be at least leaning in and listening to Y and Z. So for the Fox, there's some sweet spots. We have acoustics that are unbelievable. People don't even know how great the acoustics are. This building was built with a special acoustic material on the walls back in 1930, and it's still there, and it's integrated into the aesthetics of the venue, but it has this audio quality that is just unbelievable. And so what that means is that acoustic material is, people don't even know why it sounds so good. It just sounds really, really good. And so Americana and folk and singer-songwriters, those people just rise up in our venue. And so those always sell really well too. That it aligns a little bit with the aesthetic vibe of Tucson too, but there's still a mix of other things that we do because of the role we play in the community. So I'll stop talking there because those are some of my initial impulses about it. It really has to be first and foremost about what you got to work with.
And you teed that up for me so perfectly, because we sit in a very different space being in Phoenix Metro, and we've been presenting for 35 years. So it's a very competitive environment here. There's almost nothing that someone bigger or a casino can't book before you can. So we have to build it off of who can we route with, how do we build a relationship to get multi-date. So we do that. But when I started as the GM, because I did programming for many, many years before I was in this role. And the thing that I really worked on is, what could we do great? Because I can't compete with a $12 million budget. At the time, we were a $1 million budget, right? We can't compete with anyone. We were so small. We had 3 days a week. We're barely it was tough. It was very tough. But so I said, what can I do best? Well, we can have the customer service that stands apart from anyone else. And I can tell you that I can stand on that. We treat people impeccably from the moment they get in the parking lot, and we take care of our artists impeccably from start to finish. So that's something, coming from a 5-star resort background, I knew how to deliver that. So we hire for that. We were customer service folk, and everyone's about customer service. I know that, but I will say we really kick butt at that. We're really good at it. And then I said, what is something that's not being served? Because we've got all this competition, and what is something? Well, at the time I started programming, I didn't see anyone coming to black and brown shows. There's no Hispanic programming, no programming for Black audiences. And we had a real lack of programming for family programs that intergenerational grandma to grandkid can all come together. So I kind of focused on that for a decade and a half, just really working on developing the trust within the community. And we are known for that. I will meet people and they will say they're from Levine or from where, whatever faraway town they came from. And they're like, we come to Chandler because we know we're welcomed. We know we're safe there. We know that it's a safe space to be. And the community identified us as that safe space. So now you can look at our sales on a lot of artists, especially in R&B and soul and things like that, will do 30% more than the national average. And that's because the community trusts us and believes in us. And so I kind of worked on identifying certain markets that we could kind of stand out with instead of just competing on that big, how do you market to 16 genres? No idea. But we are multidisciplinary. We do it all. But gosh, it's hard. So if we could have some focus, those tend to be some underlying currents of what we do while we do it all. So I think Bonnie's point is each and every is so distinct. There's not one venue, but they kind of have this identity. Scottsdale Arts has an identity about the type of show. So someone calls me to book a show, I'll be like, that would fit better in Scottsdale. I would go there, or try Mesa for that. Tempe has a nice hall for that because it's about finding the right fit. And so I think that's very true. It's venue specific.
Do you find that people want just the big national touring acts, or do local and regional acts have enough support in the community that they can make careers out of it? So I know we've got some wonderful Michigan folk artists that I have been following for years and years and years, and they're scraping by. They're getting bookings, but it's, it can be tenuous at times. So I'm always really interested in sort of what local or regional artists are doing that really embody the culture of a place, and if they have enough support to make it their career, and if they're getting bookings and you feel like you can integrate those folks into national programming as well.
We certainly learned that post-COVID that we weren't doing a very good job of that. I will just say that. But we also have a 1,500 seat venue and 3 days a week, and I got to pay the bills.
Yeah.
So a local artist typically is not right for our size venue, but we are able to make that venue a little bit smaller with some configuration. We have a 250 and a 350 seat, so we have multiple options. But honestly, we are doing more work there with working with our local artists. We certainly integrate them into some things, but more on the education side, more on the using artists to build community. So we do it in a little slightly different way due to our size. And so, but I know there's many venues doing wonderful work with local artists, and we collaborate to make sure we know who those artists are, but that is not our best work, honestly, just based on our size. Bonnie, how do you guys do that?
I think that's exactly it. I think the short answer to your question, Katie, is yes, the market's there. And those artists are doing that work. And hopefully they are identifying the right venues and partners. And I will say that so the Fox is currently involved in a significant capital expansion project, and one of the key motivators of that project actually is to add a second performance space, specifically because our current performance space does not provide the right fit for the local and regional artists, and because those artists want to be at the Fox, it's important for them to be at the Fox because in Tucson that's a thing. And so it's important for us to be able to provide the platform that we provide to those folks. But the economics, when you're dealing with a 1,200 seat house, don't work to do that regularly. And so it becomes important. And this is something that's driving partly our desire to expand so that we can fill that role much better than we've been able to in the past. And I think that it's important to recognize those things and then to be ready and able to grow or change or adjust or shift the size of your room down to 250 or whatever it might be, given what the demand and needs are in the community for that.
That's great. Christina, to the same point, what do you see at sort of a state level in terms of maybe grants or smaller organizations that are working in that local and regional sense? Do you see enough support for those artists that they can make a living and they can be working locally and regionally?
It's really tough, and I'm going to sort of distinguish the sort of rural and the metropolitan areas. I think that to Michelle and Bonnie's point, for artists, what we're hearing in the more metropolitan areas is a need for space. There was definitely a lot of small to mid venues that closed during COVID, and those are the spaces where local artists are trying to find, but it's very difficult to book. Also, what we're seeing is a need for space and hearing is a need for space to develop. What does it mean to develop plays, to develop dance? What does it mean to find that one beautiful dance floor that I hear every single dancer talk about, right? I would say that is something that is continuing to develop and is very much top of mind for us, as well as several other public entities, about how do we make sure that the local arts ecosystem thrives instead of it being something where you emerge, you find your footing, but then you have to go somewhere else, to what Michelle was saying, to really establish the career to come back. And that's not something that we want to continue. That's something we want people to be able to grow their full career here in Arizona. In the rural areas, I am seeing a much higher amount of local artists because the venues that are there are smaller to mid-size. There's very few sort of massive venues out there. And those tend to have very much a driving mission about local artists, about hiring those people, fostering them, or connecting them with tours that are coming through. But it's tough because those organizations do struggle with funding, where, as Michelle mentioned, it's a difficult funding environment here in Arizona. So there's a will, and I think the way is the harder part.
Let me jump off of that, Christina, and let's talk about funding for just a second, because we mentioned it a couple of times. I hosted a similar panel with our friends in Montana on an episode, several months ago, and we had a pretty long discussion about the funding landscape there. And so it makes me curious about, first of all, why is Arizona number 48 in the country? And then what does that actually look like? Is there corporate support? Are you working purely off of grants? Is it a very individualized donor base for arts organizations across the state? Like, what is just the makeup there? Was that how it felt prior to the pandemic? Has it shifted since? What have sort of those funding trends been, and where's just the money coming from in general?
I can start from a public funding side, but I think my colleagues here can definitely elaborate on the other pieces. We can't talk about funding in Arizona without talking about the 2008 recession, because Arizona, Phoenix, Tucson were so deeply impacted by that economic downturn that it sort of is the background behind where we are now. And so back then, for us as a state agency, we were supported by the general fund, and amongst all the hard decisions were taken out. And the result of that is that every single year, our incredible supporters across the state ask their legislators to include us into the budget, but often it is a single year allocation, which adds, it's a little bit of instability because you start from zero every single year. And that is detrimental to our organizations. And we fund about 600 grants, and 250 of those are arts and cultural organizations across the state. So the impact for our agency when we don't have funding is quite significant, especially in smaller rural areas. For funding in the metropolitan areas, I know a lot of my colleagues at local arts agencies, they also fund their areas, but a lot of those funding lines are tied to capital improvement projects, which are funding for public art, they're for infrastructure, and their grant making towards organizations is on the smaller side. That lends us to, if we look at the data for in terms of a state public allocation, us being 48th, because per capita wise, that looks at like 26 cents each year, which is a quarter. And to sort of put it in comparison with states around us, because I think the West is an incredible identity that we all lean into, is that our colleagues over in Utah, their funding per capita is actually over $2 compared to our one quarter. So it has incredible ripple effects across the entire state from our vantage point.
Wow, thank you. And I love the data. Thank you, Christina. That sheds a lot of light on the situation. Michelle and Bonnie, where are you seeing you and your colleagues getting support? Is it corporate? Is it grants? Are you chasing individual donors? What do you? How are you funding your organizations?
Well, for us, it's primarily individuals, and we first of all are dependent on ticket sales to a pretty extreme degree. That's true for presenting organizations, for producing organizations, more so in general. But we are roughly 75% earned income. And it's a high bar to keep hitting and hitting and hitting
Wow,
and hitting and
that
hitting.
that
And
is
there's not,
very high.
yeah, and there's not a lot of room for error. What that means is that, a show tanks and because of who knows what, right? All the ways that it can tank and it can create a budget problem. And then the bulk of our contributed revenue is coming from individuals. The corporate landscape, certainly in Tucson, there's more of it in Phoenix than in Tucson, and more of it in Tucson than in most of the rural areas in the state. Is consistent with any sort of population centers. There's nothing new there, but we really do not have corporate support here in any meaningful way. And it means that we do need to get really creative. It means that for us, actually, one of the things we're doing now, linked to our capital campaign, is we're really looking at some commercial models in the sports and entertainment world around corporate partnership and the sponsorship type of model that really is transactional in a very contracted, documented way, right? Because that's a way we need to develop an area that is sustainable and can help the organization continue to do what it needs to do. So we're really starting to think about lots of different ways that we can do that. We're also focused on those individual relationships, and they need to be nurtured. They need to be the ways Michelle was talking about how you take care of people and how you interact with every individual becomes so vital to the success of the organization, whether that person has never given you a dollar or whether they have routinely given you a lot of money. That the way that you interact with them and invite them into relationship with the organization has to be an everyday, every moment practice. I mean, that's true with grant funders as well. It's true with anybody who's deciding to invest in your organization. But I think that the degree to which we are dependent in Arizona on each individual and the changes that happen with everyone's lives and the world and all of that is very real. There isn't a stable funding source right here. And I came from Minnesota where there was a very stable funding source and is stable funding source, at least at the government level, that's very different from what is here in Arizona. And then also quite a range of significant foundations that invested not just in the Twin Cities, but in some of the other cities in the state.
Well, and I don't have a lot to add that's different there, but I will say when we were first built, I mean, people thought we were crazy. This school, city, nonprofit, public private partnership. And now communities are coming to me. I mean, I'm asked at least 3 times a week to share over lunch. How did you pull that off? What was your intergovernmental agreement? So that collaborative model was how we built the fiscal sustainability for us to be where we are. And we're 86% earned revenue. But with that said, I have a municipal partner that takes care of capital expenses. So this is not even a comparison to what Bonnie and a nonprofit has to do to survive here. Our municipal support is massive to our impact, but at the same time, they've never had a willingness to fund a development staff until we were 35 years into the organization. So we all have our kind of pain points, but I will say that our largest contributors are individuals, and that's it. I mean, everything is about individual people. So, yes, we are the international headquarters of Intel, so we get a little support by Intel, but that's only because we're in Chandler. That would not be, they don't support arts funding anywhere else that I know of. So again, it's that super hyper focused, community driven individuals that care about this place. And I echo that, and we're all different. And I don't know how you do it, Bonnie. I admire you every day.
And the major cities of Arizona, their corporate and their funding and the landscape of foundations are relatively young compared to the Twin Cities or things like that, where there's multi-generational corporations. A lot of our larger corporations are within their first generation. But I will say what the highlight is that we are seeing with the next generation of folks that are being born, grown up here, is that there's a strong sense of the identity. You'll see people with T-shirts that say 40, State 48, right? Which is
From
we were the fourth.
Chandler.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly, right. And so I think that landscaping is a little bit changing, but it is very different from cities where they have fifth generation started a company and now it's a massive corporation.
Wow, that is really fascinating. And I feel like we're going to have to check in 2 years from now and get the update of how all of this has developed, because we know the philanthropy landscape is changing drastically right now. And it's going to be interesting to see how the tides turn. So, all right. Well, Christina, Bonnie, Michelle, our time is short. I had so many questions we didn't get to today. I want to thank you all for spending this time with me. I've coined this term, kick-ass women of the arts, for our podcast, when we get to feature amazing women like the three of you. And I'm so glad I got to have the three of you as guests today, because you are all doing amazing work and I'm grateful for you. In closing, I'd like to ask each of you to make your best pitch to our colleagues across the country to come and spend a long weekend in Arizona and check out the performing arts scene. And go.
I'll throw out there, because I was just there. Go spend some time in northern Arizona. Take a ride to Sedona, hit Flagstaff, hit Jerome. There's some beautiful places. The landscape is unimaginable. Disney designed things about Sedona's landscape. This landscape is the most beautiful place on earth. And you go there and you take it in and you feel so full with the nature and environment. And what these arts organizations are doing in these rural communities and larger communities, especially, I just love that area. So I'm going to pitch for Northern Arizona.
Well, I'll selfishly pitch for Tucson, where the food culture here is insane, and and the culinary arts are performative arts, and they are. You could go to a different internationally renowned chef location and just be down to earth with them at every meal on your weekend, and then every evening go see some other, whether it's a local blues artist or it is a touring artist at the Fox in a historic venue. So the range of experience that could happen in a couple of days is really unbelievable, as well as being outside in that incredible desert. As long as you're here between September and February, March.
Love it. I love the hot travel tips. Thank you, Bonnie.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, that's
Christina.
why we got the other half of the state in the north, because the rest of the year it's
Exactly.
great there. I would say there's always something for someone here within the arts. And I'll just walk you through one of my days. One Saturday, I started the day at 6 a.m. on the west side of Phoenix, visiting AZDEO that had gathered, I think, 800 high school dance students together into one auditorium. And the energy and the vibrancy of all those kids just like learning from each other was fantastic. And then right after that, there was Movement Dance Source over in Scottsdale. And it was like a traveling trolley where you just jumped on and you experienced public art and danced together. And then later on that evening, then I was over at Scottsdale Arts, and there was this fantastic modern dance performance that made my heart stop from just the amount of emotion I felt watching it. And that was just a day of dance. And you can just imagine the amount of arts and culture we have here that goes from the visual to the music to the performing. And so that is my pitch, is that whatever you're looking for, give me an email, send me an email, and I will direct you, because there's so much happening here.
That's wonderful. Well, again, Michelle, Bonnie, Christina, thank you so much for your time. It's been such a pleasure learning more about Arizona and what you all are doing down there. It sounds amazing. I think I'm going to book my plane ticket as soon as we hang up and come see you all. So thank you again for being guests here on There's No Business Like.
All right, everyone. Thanks for listening to There's No Business Like. Our producers and hosts are Brian Zelmer, Josh Benson, Kevin Maynard, Katie Miller, and me, Danielle Van Hook. Views expressed in this podcast are ours alone and are not reflective of the organizations we are a part of. Keep up with us at nobusinesslike.com. There you'll find links to all of our episodes and socials. If you like this podcast, give us a like, a follow, a review, or our favorite, a 5-star rating. Oh wait, what was that site? I got it, don't worry. It is nobusinesslike.com. Do I sound out bus-I-ness every time I type it? Yep, sure do. Stay in touch, my friends.